Luigi Mangione is the most talked about man in the world right now.
But what's interesting in all of this isn't just what he did, it's the ideas he had.
Only a couple of months before he carried out his act, he spent some time in Japan. During his time there, he developed a lot of thoughts about what's wrong with the country and how to fix it.
I'm going to break down the ideas he had, and together we're going to find out if Luigi Mangione's radical ideas could truly improve Japan.
On a tweet made in April 18, 2024, Luigi calls modern Japanese urban environment an evolutionary mismatch for the human animal, and lays down a 5-step plan to revitalize Japan and fix its falling birth rates. The first step in his plan is to replace conveyor belt sushi and restaurant vending machine ordering with actual human interaction with a waiter.
It's a noble idea, but sadly one that doesn't work in Japan, with the reason being that Japan simply doesn't have enough workforce to staff every restaurant with waiters. This is due to labor shortage caused by the declining birth rate, the thing that Luigi is trying to fix in the first place.
More to the point, even if you did add more waitstaff, it wouldn't really make Japan more social. Waitstaff here don't make small talk like they do in places like the US, where tips create that extra incentive to do so. Here, you're expected to just do your job efficiently and politely, kinda like a machine. So whether you're interacting with a robot or a waiter, the experience is essentially the same. This is even something Luigi talks about on an email sent to his colleague on April 16, 2024, where he calls Japan peak NPC-ville, and shares a story where he ran to a police box to get help for a man having a seizure. In his email, he talks about being frustrated that the police officer didn't immediately follow him across the street due to the light being red.
I've actually been in a somewhat similar situation myself. One time, 3 a.m. in the morning, I came across an elderly woman with Alzheimer's out on the street, so I went to a police box to get her help. Now when I came in, the police officers didn't immediately jump out of their seats and run with me to fix the problem. They asked me what happened and then handled the situation step by step.
The thing with Japanese police is that they're more like local security guards. They're not EMTs, ready to leap into action whenever a weird foreigner comes and tells to follow them. And honestly, even if the officer had run after Luigi, what can they do? Now, I'm not saying Japanese police do their jobs properly, far from it, but I wouldn't classify this case as peak NPC behavior, as he said.
Is there NPC behavior in Japan? Kinda, but that's mostly in customer service jobs.
During work hours, people are expected to be on their best behavior and treat the customer like a machine, as I mentioned earlier. However, most Japanese are simply normal people once they punch out of work.
So if your only interactions with Japanese people are through customer service, then yeah, the people here might seem a bit weird.
The second part of Luigi's plan is to ban Tenga fleshlights and other adult products sold in Don Quixote-style discount stores.
Now I will say that there is some truth to the fact that overexposure to lewd stuff on the internet is probably not the healthiest thing for your brain. But this is part of a larger problem that can't be fixed by just banning Tengas.
Luigi's idea feels like trying to fight obesity by banning milkshakes. Maybe it would help a little, but the real problem is the sugar, which you also can't ban, because even if you do, people will just find their way around it. As lame as it may sound, the real solution is simply awareness. Once people start understanding how these habits might not be the best for them, they'll naturally start cutting back.
Now I know it might sound a bit crazy, but I think we're already seeing this a bit in the West when we joke about gooners and have things like No Nut November. Looking at these, we can clearly see that people are thinking about how much time they spend on hub and if it's good for them.
In Japan though, I don't see the same cultural shift happening yet, but hopefully, eventually, these kind of ideas will also manifest in Japan. It's a ship that turns slowly, but I do believe we need to have a conversation about how much we indulge ourselves in the age of the internet. Not just here in Japan, but everywhere. The third step in Luigi's plan is to replace 24/7 esports cafes where young men earn false fitness signals by playing games like Tekken and Overwatch, with athletics in school.
First off, esports cafes aren't really big in Japan. They're huge in South Korea, but here people mostly play at home, so saying they're a problem is just not true. However, even if they were a thing in here, isn't it better for people to game in a social place? Luigi's whole point was to encourage natural human interaction, but then he's dismissing one of the few places where gaming actually involves socializing.
As for physical fitness, Japan isn't struggling in that area. When I walk around, I see kids playing soccer, baseball, and other sports all the time. Physical activity is a huge part of school life in here, with sports club running from elementary school all the way through university. Outside of schools, Japanese life naturally includes a lot of walking because of the way cities are built and how people rely on public transportation. We all know Japanese people are generally very thin and healthy, especially when compared to other developed countries. Sure, encouraging more exercise in any country is always a good thing, but I don't think physical fitness is something Japan needs to be especially worried about. The second to last part in Luigi's plan is to stigmatize maid cafes, claiming they're a problem because lonely salarymen pay young girls to dress as anime characters.
Now I know on the internet we all know about maid cafes, but here's a little secret, they're actually extremely niche.
Sure, if you're a tourist and visit Akihabara like most tourists do, they might seem like a big deal because they're so visible there. But outside of Akihabara, and maybe a few other specific areas, they're really not a big thing. They exist, but they're not a widespread cultural phenomenon or a real problem.
If Luigi had mentioned hostess clubs or kabakuras instead, then we could have a discussion here. But I guess he didn't mention them because tourists rarely go to hostess clubs, and that brings me to my next point.
A lot of Luigi's comments feel like they're coming from the perspective of a tourist. His arguments focus on surface-level things that tourists might notice, like conveyor belt sushi or maid cafes. Even his final point, which is to revitalize traditional Japanese culture like Shintoism and onsen, in my opinion, missed the mark quite a bit, since both of those are alive and well.
I mean, I probably go to the onsen the most out of the people I know, and I wish they were less alive, because then I could actually feel in a sauna when I want to.
And even if we were to play around with this maid cafe suggestion, there's still a contradiction. If Luigi wants people to have more human interaction, isn't that exactly what maid cafes provide? Sure, it's performative and part of the business model, but at the end of the day, people are choosing to go there for some level of human connection. I do think some of Luigi's points scratch the surface of these issues, but overall, most of his observations seem to come from the eyes of a tourist visiting the country and not taking note of the underlying issues.
Now it is very much obvious that Japan has societal issues and the birth rate is falling down. Just like in many developed countries, the low birth rates are mostly due to economic reasons, but there are also some Japan-related issues like the long working hours and lack of safety nets for parents. I'm not saying the ideas Luigi laid out were all bad, but I do think even if we applied all of these to the Japanese society tomorrow, the change wouldn't really be noticeable.